Mirrology. It's basically a word I made up referring to bilateral symmetry in our language. For example, the word reverse. See the way the RE reverses around the V. It's used to signify the meaning of reverse, so it's iconic. It's a little bit like pictography a little bit, but in our word, in our speech, in the word itself. I first started trying to figure out poetymology after I'd spent some time in China, and realized, or was trying to understand how they're writing their ideographic script with the thousands of forms, trying to figure out how different that was than ours with just 26 letters. Just trying to access Chinese psychology. And what I did is I started looking for iconism in English writing to see if I could find something similar or find some kind of access to what it was like to live in a more pictographic universe or language anyway. I couldn't at first see much iconism at all in our writing or in English at all at first. None of the kind of logic that I could see in their writing. Like their word for middle or center is just basically a square with a line through the center. Tree is just the shape of a tree, and a forest is a bunch of those. Those are simple ones. They get a lot more complicated, and they're not all so obviously pictographic. But I did find if there are a couple. There are some words. There is pictography in English, just not much of it. But then I realized that a word like reverse is still iconic. It's just not, and you can even see it in the writing actually, because the letters reverse themselves. So I realize there's plenty of iconic signaling, onomatopoeia. I've heard onomatopoeia described as sound pictography, for example, which is an odd synesthesia. But I started looking, instead of just at our writing, I just started to look at the words and look for any kind of iconism in the words, whether it was spoken or written, didn't really matter. Any kind of iconic signaling. And I started to realize English has iconism, just like, analogous to the iconism that Chinese writing consists of. It's just not obvious in our writing. Later on, I discovered that the alphabet itself is pictographic. That the letters all show you are talking cues about how to position the mouth. But that's pretty much unconscious. You can see a little bit of pictography in the words, like boob or eye, but not much. But this reverse, I did see bilateral symmetry and realized that is iconic signaling in our words. That does show up fairly well in the alphabet. Not it's not perfectly palindromic, but it shows up fairly well. And what's interesting is when you see bilateral symmetry, or what I call mirrology in our language. And it also, you can see that it's conveying the meaning of the word by doing so, like in reverse, like reverse does. Now, I found two different types of words, or two different types of mirrology. In our language. Oops, I just had something and I lost it. I had two different types of mirrology that I stand out to me, two different categories. One is in a single word, like reverse. But then there's also what two words where one word is a left-hand version and the other word's a right-hand version, or vice versa. It depends on which order you go. I call those BackWord poetymologies. For example, note and tone. The rough reversals of each other, the NOTs, and you can see that they carry a similar meaning, a connected meaning within them. So these two types I've started to notice in our language and realize that they were conveying a meaning. I think bilateral symmetry stands out to us partly because we're bilaterally symmetrical ourselves. And we notice things that are bilaterally symmetrical, I think because we see everything twice. And a symmetrical thing looks the same to both eyes, because it reads left, right, and right, left similarly. It's like when we look in the mirror at ourselves, our face doesn't really look backwards, even though it is. We know that a left hand and a right hand are the same thing, even though they're oppositely built. So we're used to seeing this pairing, and I think language takes advantage of that to signal symmetry, both signaling symmetrical objects out there, but also sort of jumping out, being more obvious to us since we notice symmetrical objects. Faces, it's just a trait that so many of the other animals, other people, objects that humans make, cars, boats, vessels, bridges, anything that's balanced has. I think we see balance. So the two types of, let me start with the single word, what I call single word mirrology. And I have a chart I want to put up here. Single word mirrology, like reverse was my first example. These words, you can see how they indicate. Divide's another good one. Divide, similar to reverse. They're connector words like medium, refer, rumor. These words, connecting two things. Remember. The RM and the MR, meme in the middle, is also symmetrical. That B is a similar B similar to the press, the lips, remember the second repetition is being pressed in, the ember is being pressed in as in imbue or embed. Good signaling there. Level and loyal. Some kind of balance there and level you can see with that symmetry. Loyal, kind of similar conceptually. Boob, eye, the word eye, E-Y-E, you can see the face, the symmetry of it. Boobs, similar. Kayak, boats that roll. Kayaks, the word itself kind of is rollable. Rubber, bounces back. River's a good one. That V is in same V as in valley. The two R's are like the levees on either side. Levee itself, sort of say here's the V at the bottom. I can't do it with your hands. Here's the V at the bottom. You know, a levee's kind of on the side here, just one side, and the other side it's only indicating one side. The levee on this side, but that V of valley, river, levee, very a good pictography there. Xerox. Xerox is another good one. It's a copy. So those are that's single word mirrology. Words that are symmetrical and convey their meaning that way. Then there's another one that I call BackWord poetymology. And that's like note tone. But this is when two separate words from two separate lineages mirror each other and seem to have some kind of opposite meaning or similar meaning. Opposites, aren't always exactly opposite, but they're connected somehow. But somehow you can see that the structural symmetry and the semantic symmetry, they're both mirroring each other at the same time. That's what I call a BackWord poetymology, where one word is the shadow of another. Because the left eye and the right eye see differently. They see different images, and they're basically the reverse of each other because the eyes are oppositely built and the brains that analyze them are also oppositely built. So when we see one form of the word, we also see the shadow of it, the reflection of it in the opposite world. And that's why I think that structure also kind of carries some charge with it to give a shared meaning between the two forms. And I've found 100 plus of these words that I think co-evolved together with a shared structure, shared meaning. Now, I'm going to just basically go through a list of them. I think these words evolved mostly out of speech. They're not perfect reflections. They're not perfectly reflected in the alphabet. But when you realize all the variations, that phoneticism is hard, the phonetic alphabet's hardly perfect. There's many ways to spell these words, and the dialects of English over the time have had lots of variations in pronunciation too. So they're just rough approximations, sort of like onomatopoeia is just a rough approximation of the sound that's being imitated. So it takes some creative phonetics, some creative spelling sometimes to see this, to see the reflections in these words. But you look at enough of them and you start to realize that it's a coincidence, but it becomes a meaningful coincidence that language is picked up on. And here's mirror and rhyme. Mirror, rhyme. Rhyme is basically, a reflection. Two words reflecting each other, two lines reflecting each other. They don't look, neither of them are very phonetically spelt. But if you play with the spelling, you can kind of see rhyme, mirror. Some of the shape words, forms like tub and butt, T-U-B, B-U-T-T, rounded, like bowl and lobe. They're rounded words, they work each way, so there's probably poetic reasons for both, bowl and lobe, basically, but so it works either way. It's a reversible form. Lays and zeal. You can see the relations there, the direct opposite relation. Tire and rut, the RT. But then you look at a related one, track and cart, or cart and truck, either one, all those. Cart leaves a track. Curb and brake, similar. Curbs, brake, are similar, like a brake to a brake. Steam and mist, wet and dew. Those are good ones. Moist is in there too. Steam and moist. Floor and roof. Floor and roof. Just that L, like lay, lie. But those are good opposites. It goes with raise and stare. Stare has the T, getting a step there, but still raise and stare. A good opposite. Meet and team. Team and mate. Row and oar. Help, plea. Now, here's one of my favorite ones. Saw and was. I saw, I was. Kind of connecting the past tense of see, seeing, and being, which is interesting. And then when you go to the present tense, is and see, like I see, I is, it is, I see. See has, when you're S-E-E, has two E's in it, but could easily been spelled S-I, like the Spanish word for yes, see. So the present tense, is and see, are reverses, and so are the past tenses, saw and was. The irregulars, they still follow the same pattern. So there's a reverse connection there, a backward poetymology between seeing and being, which I find just philosophically interesting. The two E's in see, by the way, those are pictographic I's, the same ones you see in the word I, or oho, the two O's, peer, peep, pictographic language there. Name and mean, to name is to mean. Vain and naive, N-A-I-V-E, V-A-I-N. the naivete of youth, the vanity of youth. You can see the relations there between vanity and naivete, pick up in their reflections. Pool and loop. Perimeter of a pool is a loop. Ocean and nausea. Ocean and nausea. See, you don't really see it in the words. I mean, in nausea, you get nautical, the beginning of nautical, and you get sea, S-E-A. So you get some hints there, because seasickness is the prototypical nausea. But if you look closer and try to make some phonetic out of the spelling, in that C in ocean is more of an SH, and the S in nausea is more of a SH also. Nausea ends with a vowel, oceans begins with a vowel, and then the ends, the letter N at the beginning of nausea and ocean. So there's a lot of good symmetry in those two words, and it makes sense when you think of the link between nausea and seasickness. Yeah, a lot of good philosophical work. Yoga and ego. There's got to be some connection there. Yogi and ego. Yeah, but I've got a whole bunch of these. Lots more than I'm talking about here. Answer and reason. Think of NSR, RSN, basically. You on a quest, you have a reason. It's a question, and the answer is the reason for the quest, or for the question. So, interesting relation between answer and reason. Interesting to realize that answer and reason have a backword reflection there. Nature and origin. That's another one that's kind of hard to see, but it's interesting. But, when we say nature, that's, where we're from. Basically, in the nature you could see as N-C-H-R, origin, just to reverse that, R-C-H-N, origin. Okay, well, I will put the full list down below of Mirrological English, and it's a Mirrology.